Hi, welcome to part 2 of the Exercise Science Kinesiology lecture series. In this video, we're going to be going over the upper body pull muscles. In the last video, we talked about the upper body push muscles. The link to that video will be above. In today's video, talking about the pull muscles of the upper body, we're mainly going to be focused on the thoracic spine, or the thoracic connection being here to here. The lower back will be saved for the core video or core section in video 3 when we discuss legs and core. So keep in mind that today we're only talking about the upper back as responsible for the pull. With that being said, let's get into it. So today we are talking about pull, and let's draw up our figure here, our nice bodybuilder figure. Forgive me if it's not proportional. There's a reason I became a kinesiology and personal trainer and not an artist. All right, so looking at the back, there's a couple muscles that are mainly responsible for the upper body pull, those being 5 muscles, similar to the 5 muscles that are responsible for the upper body push. Looking at the upper body pull, we have, starting from the top down, the major one that everyone's familiar with is the trapezius muscle. So the trapezius muscle is responsible for shoulder blade connection and pulling the shoulder blades down and up, or back and up rather. The biggest thing about the trapezius muscle that most people are unfamiliar with is we consider it, or we confuse it, as a part of the shoulder. So a lot of times I see clients who say that they're struggling with shoulder pain. And what they actually mean to say is they have trapezius pain that's leading to a lot of neck pain, but they say shoulder when they're touching here, so I know what they're talking about. That being said, the shoulder is more relegated to the deltoid. We're looking at the trapezius muscle. Now this muscle is a very pronounced muscle in most people and very overactive 9 times out of 10. This is responsible, like I said, for contracting the shoulder blade up and across, more in this direction. Like we talked about in the push video, the lines here are the striations, or the line of pull. And we also discussed anchor points, or connection and insertion. We connect the trapezius along the spine, and it inserts out here, which allows the shoulder blade to be drawn towards the spine. As we move down in those muscle groups, we look at the rhomboid. And the rhomboid is responsible for assisting the trapezius in pulling the shoulder blade towards the spine. So think about that postural shoulders down and back, or shoulders in pockets that we talked about in the first video. So we're pulling the shoulder blade straight back. That would be the rhomboid and lower half of the trapezius. If we did this and then began to shrug up, we would be activating more trapezius than rhomboid. And finally, we have the latissimus dorsi, or the lat. The latissimus dorsi is responsible for pulling the shoulder blade down, as well as creating elbow flexion towards the bottom. So if I was to use the rhomboids, the middle one here, to pull my shoulder blades back, and up would be trapezius, neutral would be rhomboid, and down we would start to connect into those lat muscles. The lat is also responsible for taking the elbow from a flexed position, where the anterior deltoid from video 1 would be responsible, to drawing it down towards the spine, or towards the rib cage. This is what the primary job of the lat is for. We then manipulate the exercises such as pull-ups, chin-ups, dumbbell pullovers to activate that muscle. But primarily, these are the 3 big ones of the back. Now we move into the shoulder, where we have the posterior deltoid, where we talked about the lateral and anterior in video 1, and its job is to assist in final flexion backwards of that elbow, assisting in either a row, assisting in stabilizing on a bench press, as well as other general activities. Archers, as a big one, have a lot of pain in the rotator cuff or rear deltoid because of that drawback. So in general, this one's very, very important for stabilization, but also assists in elbow flexion coming back. Finally, we have the bicep, which I'm going to use dotted lines to show on here that it's in the front of the body. The bicep is responsible for the elbow coming up this way, or the forearm coming up this way, to create flexion of the bicep. This, just like in video 1 where we talked about the chest fly, gives us a variation between a rear delt fly and a row. And it's all based on the elbow flexion. Very good. Once we have finished looking at these muscles here that are responsible for pulling towards the spine, we want to think about the cues that we just discussed in video 1. One is shoulders in pockets, as well as elbows are key. So here we have the elbow generating what muscle group we're utilizing, and the hand, again, is more of the gripping mechanism. This will tell us how wide we're gripping the bar or how hard we have to grip. But the elbow is going to be mainly focused on where the muscles that we're trying to activate are getting hit. Importantly to note, when we're talking about pull, that we need to look not only at the 5x3 rule, which I'll put up here, and our separation. For more detail on the 5x3 rule, please go review video 1. So not only do we need to understand the 5x3, but we need to understand the frontal separation of the body. So as we look at the torso, and let's give a little bit of a butt, the body here, from a face forward, we have what's called the frontal plane. The frontal plane comes down the middle of the body through the arch of the foot. Another cue about elbows are key, especially when training the back, is if the elbow cannot reach behind you, then we're not training the back. Just like we talked about in video 1, where if we were doing a chest fly and collapsing the hands in, and the elbow isn't creating proper flexion of the pectoral muscle, we're not getting the proper training. Same applies to the back. If I cannot pull the elbow behind me, then I am not properly training my back. This we most commonly see in the lat pull down, pull up, or cable row. Also the bent over dumbbell row. A lot of these get mishandled when in the gym because we've picked, again, an inconsistent or an inefficient weight for us to properly develop muscle connection. So with a weight that's been picked incorrectly, that's too heavy, a lot of times what will happen is the bicep will take over and I will create flexion this way. Such as in a cable row, I'll end up bending this way and tucking the shoulders in, and you'll notice that my back isn't moving at all. It's very hard to build muscle on a muscle that's not moving. So we want to make sure that we have shoulders in pockets, cue number 1, and we're drawing the elbows behind that frontal plane. You can also use the stitch line on most t-shirts and workout shirts as a nice cue of if you're getting back there or not. And this will help if you're spotting a friend, if you're watching videos back for yourself, or if you're with a coach. The same rule applies when we're doing the lat pull down or a pull up. A lot of times when we're training clients, we see that the arm comes up, and as I pull, the elbow comes forward. This is a very difficult state to train the back, as the shoulder blade has no flexion capacity from up here. And we notice the elbow's in the front of that frontal plane or the t-shirt line, and this does not allow for proper lat activation in most exercises. There are few, like the dumbbell pullover, that may change that because we're coming from a very flexed and upward position into the frontal plane. However, we've changed where gravity exists. We're not going to get too much detail on that because I can definitely go down a rabbit hole about the proper form and function of the lat dumbbell pullover. We're focused more on the general pulls. So cable row, dumbbell row, or lat pull down being to the back of the body behind that t-shirt line. So keep that in mind the next time you're doing those exercises, is the elbow needs to stay back here. Wonderful. So now that we've addressed the frontal plane, we can look more towards the 5x3 rule and how this affects the muscles of the back. In the 5x3, we noticed that there were multiple degrees of elevation and separation that caused changes in the muscle recruitment that we're looking for. The same thing applies to the back. We're just going to be using the back of the elbow here instead of the front of the elbow here, like in the push video. Using the back of the elbow, we can assign the muscle group that we want. So if I'm at 180 degrees, I'm going to draw that line back to the torso. And you'll notice as I draw this line back that I actually miss the rear deltoid and I land in the insertion of my latissimus dorsi, or lat. We'll talk about how to activate the rear delt properly a little bit later. So we notice that we passed the rear deltoid and we're in the upper part of the latissimus dorsi. So we would say that 180 degrees would affect the lat primarily. In the 120 degree angle, so this would be angling back or leaning back on a lat pull down, or doing a very sternocostal style chin up or lat or pull up that allows us to bend the lower spine and create that 120 degrees of flexion. We can see that as I pull down and I use that line, that we're still affecting the lats. So the lat, much like the pec major, takes up 2 degrees of flexion or 2 degrees of elevation on our model. Once we get to 90 degrees, we'll notice that we're more in the rhomboid here. And at 60 degrees, we're going to be more leaned forward, like a proper dumbbell shrug, getting to work the entire effectiveness of the trapezius muscle. With that being said, we move to the 0 degree range of motion, elbows at our side. And although we can shrug up in this position, it's not as effective as shrugging from the 60 degree position here, where we get a lot more trapezius activation. So keeping in mind that our elbows are at 0 degrees, we're going to say that the pull is biceps focused here, like a cable curl or a dumbbell curl, hitting the bicep with 0 degree elbow flexion. The width applies the same as video 1, which states that 1 is going to work a little closer to the spine, 2 more mid-back, and 3, just like we antagonized the lateral deltoid in our push video, this is going to do the same thing for the rear deltoid. If I go into a 3 position with my elbow wide and outside my body, this is where I get the rear deltoid activation that we were looking for earlier. So 3 is what's going to help us drive the rear deltoid as the 3 degree of separation. We can utilize this knowledge in our row position, especially when utilizing cables or dumbbells. If I use a narrow grip cable row, I'm going to be nice and tight towards the spine. I'm going to get a lot of range of motion and a lot of back activation depending on the degree that I choose. But if I choose a very wide handle, like a lat pull down handle, or I take my dumbbells and flare them out wide while I do my row, now I can activate and antagonize the rear deltoid instead of being lower and changing that muscle group into the main priority of the body. So now that we've discussed the pull section, in the next section we're going to be going over feet, legs, core, and that will take us through the 3rd video. And I believe I'm going to create a 4th bonus video that specifically talks about RPE rate of perceived exertion, as well as any other last minute pieces of advice that I can give you to make sure that you're the most successful that you can possibly be on your fitness journey. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.